Join me as YouTube star Melissa Maker interrogates me about my public speaking business. And I got to tell you, I love a good interrogation.
Well, I said, welcome to a small business marketing show where successful small business owners share their souls to take your marketing straight to the lead. Now, here's your host, Mr. Timbo Reid.
And welcome back, listeners, to another episode of Australia's #1 marketing show. I'm your host, Timbo Reid, but you, so much more importantly, you're a motivated business owner and you are ready to crank out some really good marketing so that you can grow that baby of yours into the empire it deserves to be. And that's exactly what we do around here. Big show today, long show. Big and long show. The tables are turned as YouTube star Melissa Maker takes control, and she, as I said up the front, interrogates me about how I've built my speaking business and how you can do the same. We really go quite deep into it. More on that in a minute. Got a motivational quote about the size of your dreams. And we're going to do a little check-in because I've got some really good news for you about a recent past guest. Hey, today's show, lovingly brought to you by Net Registry, who care about one thing, and that is getting your online marketing sorted. And as I have said many times before, team, you are who Google says you are. So ensuring you have a very solid online footprint is mission critical to the success of your business. And you can check out their exclusive listener packages over at netregistry.com.au/Timbo. We're also made possible by the good folk at Key Person of Influence. I reckon it's a program right for its time. So if you're keen to be more visible, valued, hard word to say valued, and connected in your industry, then head over to keypersonofinfluence.com/Timbo. They've got a couple of really good live events coming up in Melbourne and Sydney. I'll be at the Melbourne one, and I'd love to see you there. Hey, as per usual, there is marketing GOLD dripping from the ceiling over here at Small Business Big Marketing's HQ. So let's get stuck right in. Now, I think it would be appropriate that we check in on three things that I want to share with you. Number one, in the spirit of last week's show, big hugs to everyone who has bought a copy of my new book, The Boomerang Effect. It's selling like hotcakes, and I've got to tell you, I love hotcakes. I love hot donuts more, hot cinnamon donuts more. And I look forward to the moment when my book is selling like hot cinnamon donuts. Not far off, but really humbled by the amount of people, the amount of listeners who have bought a copy. Head over to smallbusinessbigmarketing.com if you want to grab a copy yourself. Much more importantly, however, is the sales and success of Daniel Flynn's book, Chapter 1. Now, Daniel is the owner of Thank You, the Thank You Group, that is trying to change the world through putting an end to poverty, which sounds just like a massive task. Go back and have a listen to episode 300 if you want to know what I'm talking about. But Daniel put a book out 4 weeks ago, and here's what's happened. It has sold 43,640 copies. I got this press release literally just before I hit record. How's that for an amazing amount of copies? He has hit his $1.2 million target. Now, mind you, this book was selling without a recommended retail price. You could pay whatever you wanted to. You could pay 1 cent or $1 million, you know. And it's funding the launch of a baby range that will, in turn, fund infant and maternal health programs, as well as Thank You's expansion into New Zealand. So he's reached his target in 4 weeks. Now, here's some other facts. This is extraordinary. Over 530 views of the video that he created. Brilliant video. That's in the show notes of episode 300. He had $1 million of advertising donated. He had 250 volunteers join him, packing the books and sending them out of a warehouse in Essendon. The volunteer that travelled the most distance was from Brisbane to Melbourne, and I'm very proud to say is a listener and past guest of this show. I'm not sure whether he wants to be mentioned or not, so I'm just going to kind of keep a lid on it, you know. Book sales went berserk and outsold every business book ever, and only second to Harry Potter in airport bookshops. And the stats just keep going. Most paid for a book, $1,300. Most paid in store, $500. Remember, no recommended retail price. Least amount paid, 50 cents. Hey, who was that? Who paid 50 cents? What a tight ass. It's terrible, isn't it? I take that back. Maybe that's all they had. Anyway, Daniel has done extraordinarily well. Well done, Dan. You are an absolute rock star. What else? One last thing to check in, which seems absolutely ridiculous after that story, but I had all my mugshots retaken last week. I did a photography shoot. And I got to tell you, team, I have a newfound appreciation for models. I spent 6 hours having all sorts of photos taken for my website, brochure, social media, iTunes album cover. Got a very, very interesting photo coming out for that. More on that later, but I will be interviewing the photographer, Jason Mullen, in an upcoming episode to talk all about the importance of photography. But I must say, having just shared all those wonderful stats about the thank you book, that my mugshots pale into insignificance. So I'm going to stop now and get on with the show.
Do you need a speaker for your next conference? Recommend Timbo to your event organiser. Or better still, book him. Tim Reid, that's reid.com.au.
Now, back in episode 295, guest and YouTube rockstar Melissa Maker asked me how I built my speaking business. Now, that's not the first time I've been asked, so I know quite a few of you listening are pretty keen to add public speaking to your marketing arsenal, either as an additional revenue stream or simply as another way to promote your business, and I would absolutely encourage you to do that. So in this interview, the tables are turned, and Melissa interviews me, which was a lot of fun. Nice being on the other end of the microphone, not knowing what question was coming next. So I reveal everything. I would suggest grabbing a pen and paper for this one, because I really do cover the nuts and bolts of what can be a very lucrative business for you and or a really effective marketing channel. So, over to Melissa.
So I guess to get things started, why don't we understand your trajectory and sort of how you got here? So let's backtrack and find out how you got into marketing in the first place.
Well, I didn't know what else to do. I was at uni. I was actually at school, finishing secondary school, and thinking, gosh, what am I going to study at uni? And I realised that marketing, if I graduated in marketing, it actually led to a lot of different things. Whereas, like, if I did accounting, I'd have to be an accountant, and if I did law, I'd have to be a lawyer. And there's no way I was going to get to law anyway. But marketing's so broad, and I think that's one of the things that freaks business owners out, is that it is so broad. So for me, that was a positive. I went and studied marketing, and then I got a job. My first job was in an advertising agency when I was in third year, and that was it, like 10 years there, and then I became a marketing manager at a large travel company, and, you know, I was just marketing through and through, and at some point about 8 years ago, I figured I need to go and do this for myself. I had to escape the cubicle, and I did.
He escaped the cubicle, and what happens next will blow your mind.
Blew my mind.
Clickbait title. Yeah. So they say it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert in something. I mean, you just sort of explained your career trajectory. And, many of us feel like we've dedicated a good chunk of our careers to doing what we do. So when did you feel like you were truly an expert in marketing? Was there like a defining moment or event where you kind of felt that you could speak to it that way?
Cliche alert. I don't think I am. I don't think I'm there yet because I just continue to learn. I think I know more than my audience. I know a little bit more than my audience. Sometimes I don't know as much as my audience because there's some smart peeps in my audience. But I just, like I always go, before I walk on stage, I do a number of things, but one of them is to remind myself that I know just that little bit more than the people in the audience, and I want to share that with them. And that, for me, takes the pressure off, and it makes me feel in service, if you like. So and I'm sure there's a plumber or a vet listening to this who's going, mate, you're an expert because you know infinitely more about this marketing caper than he or she does. But there's so much to learn, and the landscape's changing so much. Just this week, I just came across a new audio social media channel. Now, I don't go chasing the next social media channel. This one happens to be an audio one. It's called Anchor. So I'm mucking around with it, and we'll see where it goes. But one of the things that I pride myself on doing is, pride in the sense that, again, I like to be the guy who relieves the anxiety around marketing that many small business owners have. So again, if we bring that back to speaking, I sit with that feeling before I speak. And I do these things because I know how scary public speaking is, right? I mean, let's be clear here. I still get nervous when I go on stage. I can't wait to get on there. But when you have these mindsets around, I'm here to help, I'm in service, I know a little bit more than the people in the audience, I'm going to help grow their business if they listen to what I have to share. These are things that take away, it's all about me, and puts it back on, it's all about them.
Right. And that's a great answer. And I actually have a couple more questions about that, which I'll get to in a little bit. But I want to backtrack a bit and figure out, so what made you decide to do keynotes? Like, how did you get there?
I didn't. It found me. It was one of these great stories where, I got a phone call about 3 years ago. I got a phone call from a lady who says, you don't know me, but I have a client who keeps doing searches around small business marketing expert, and you keep popping up. And I'm going, cool, who are you? And anyway, it turns out she is from a speakers bureau. I didn't know what a speakers bureau was. She had a client in an insurance company who was looking to take a marketing speaker on a roadshow. I didn't know what a roadshow was.
Ooh.
So they flew me up to Sydney. I met with the client. They booked me for an 8-city roadshow.
My gosh.
Yeah, it went really well. I was nervous. I look back then and we talked about going back to, your first video, my first podcast. It's like cringe material, but...
Yeah, exactly. Gritting your teeth.
Yeah, totally. But look where we get to. And so the roadshow went really well. The Speakers Bureau, who normally books known people, I put that in inverted commas, and I wasn't one, said, wow, who are you? Will you become exclusive with us? And I didn't know what that meant. I asked some buddies who were speakers.
It's sort of like dating.
It was like, it's actually past dating. It's when you go a lot further, and it's like, we're together now,
Yeah, that's right.
And I did. And
so you asked around and people advised you that it was the kosher thing to do?
I had two schools. There was a bit of a balance. And I erred on the thought that, okay, being an exclusive with this Speakers Bureau means that I'm going to be special in their stable. And I was. I got a lot of work. In that first year, I got 63 conferences, and I ended up, and I really, that's when... It was like this crazy trajectory of I was busy, I was doing something that I'd never done before, and I needed to seek help.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible. So do you recommend going with an agency?
I think I have to say yes, because I've just been re-signed. I spent about 14 or 15 months with that bureau. I then decided to go out on my own for a year, and I had a pretty good year. Not quite as good, but I only had to get like 25% less work because that's the commission they were taking. And I got about that through direct bookings.
Right.
I then have just recently re-signed with a talent agency. It's called Ode. And they are kind of like a speakers bureau, but they also look at you in a more holistic fashion and go, what else could we do with Tim?
So maybe get you on TV or in newspapers.
Correct.
Right.
So it's not for everyone. And in fact, you know, they're pretty selective. And that sounds egotistical, but it's not like you can't just ring a speakers bureau and go, I'd like to be on your books. It doesn't work that way.
No, you're being perfectly objective. That's exactly what it is. And I'm of the mind where, you know, I like the agency idea too, especially if there's somebody who really specializes in what they do. I'm happy to pay a commission. Get me the bookings, get me the exposure. You know, you pound the pavement on my behalf.
And
if they're the experts in what they do, right? Let them go. Let them do their thing.
And that's what you pay for. And you pay a fair whack, but they get you the bookings. They chase the inquiry. They get you the bookings. They do all the admin around it. They generally get you in front of the top end of town. You know, so they're going to get you in front of I talk from an Australian point of view, the big banks or the telcos or the airlines, and be the same over in Canada, where they just have relationships with the big organisations. And I was still getting work from them directly, but I think I get more work with the big guys than through bureaus than I do just knocking on doors.
Interesting. Well, that's great insight.
And I'll say this: you may well get here, but I will say, because people who are thinking of embarking on a speaking career and thinking bureaus is the way to go, you've got to have runs on the board. You've either got to have runs on the board as a speaker, or you've got to have a hook. So I give you an example. I got runs on the board, I guess, because I did this road show and I did a really good job, and so they kind of saw and they got great client feedback. I also had a hook that I had the #1 marketing podcast in Australia, so that's something to hang your hat on, and for them too, because the Speakers Bureau looks at it and goes, well, when a client rings up with a conference and we put Tim forward, they're going to say, who's Tim? So therefore, Tim needs a hook. Now, there's the other example where the hook comes to you. So there was a lady last year, the Australian of the Year was a lady by the name of Rosie Batty. And Rosie had never spoken before. She all of a sudden found herself thrust into the limelight by being Australian of the Year. And I do work with the Speakers Bureau that she became a part of, and she was basically speaking every day. So she went from, nothing, not even considering it, to actually a fully blown career in public speaking because of the hook, which was Australian of the Year.
That's great. And that's also just marketing in general, right? Like finding that good hook that gets people interested or excited. So, for any of us who are thinking about going out and doing something like this, really figuring out what is the hook. And I guess that leads me into my next question, which is, can you explain what a keynote is actually comprised of? So when you are putting your piece together and you are thinking of what's my hook, what is it? What's it comprised of?
What's a keynote comprised of? Interesting question. So is that a technical question? Like what makes... Yeah,
it's sort of like part A, part B, part C.
Cool. So keynote is the terminology used for, I guess, like it's a presentation which generally goes for between, in my experience, and I can really only speak from my point of view, but I've done it from 20 minutes through to 90 minutes. I did 2 90-minute keynotes just last week, almost verging on workshops, because they were, 90 minutes. I mean, you've got to get people to do stuff. So let's talk about a 60-minute keynote, right, just to kind of hit the middle ground. Sure. And for me, what works, and I'll go back a step to say that the minute I thought, gee, this public speaking thing is getting serious and it looks like it's going to be a significant part of my business going forward, I went and employed 2 stand-up comedians and they became my speaking coaches, right?
Wow, What a great idea.
Well, I was travelling with a past guest of this show, a guy called Brad Smith, who owns a motorcycle brand in Australia. Brad, I was at a conference with Brad in Cairns, and this was very early days of my speaking. I saw Brad, and Brad was like a young, late 20-year-old guy, right? And a real character. And when I saw him, I thought, oh, this is going to be interesting. I wonder how he's going to speak, what he's going to speak about. He got up on stage and he nailed it. And when he got off, I said, mate, where'd you learn to do that? And he said, oh, Troy and Zara. I go, cool. Okay, what's Troy and Zara's phone number? So Troy and Zara turn out to be these two stand-up comedians, conference MC. They're a couple. They're hilarious. And on the side, they work with people like me to construct a really good keynote. So I rang them. And the first, this will answer your question, but it's the long way around. But I think it's important to understand because it's quite an interesting story.
Great.
So
yeah.
So Troy and Zara said, okay, we'd like to work with you. You know, they don't work with anyone. Again, they kind of take you through this kind of process to see is there upside in working with Tim? Can we make a difference? And they thought they could. So the first thing they did was I thought we'd meet and we'd have coffee and we'd have a laugh, and it wasn't the case. They said, find us a boardroom. So I found a boardroom at the Speakers Bureau for which I was signed, and we'll meet you there. I thought, oh, that's cool. Well, they'll come in and we'll have a chat. Well, it wasn't like that. We met at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday morning in this boardroom. They walked in. Hi, Tim. Hi, Troy. Hi, Zara. And they said, by the way, they said, have your presentation ready to give. And they walked in, sat down as an audience would, and said, off you go. Off you go. Present. So there was,
and there you were. You had to imagine them in their underwear, right?
Yeah, totally. And we'll come to that. And so I presented my keynote, and then they pulled it apart. And then very lovingly pulled it apart, and they videoed me doing it, and we kind of reviewed that. And then it was like, so then for the next kind of 6 months, I worked with Zara via Skype video, just working on the keynote. So to your question, what Zara taught me to do was the keynote that I presented to them in this boardroom, it was full of very useful facts. Yeah? It had little story and few jokes. Okay? So there's real learning there. So what I had was a keynote that, fortunately, it had good information in it, so people were interested, but it wasn't that engaging because it had no story and it didn't have enough gags. And by gags, I don't mean like you've got to be a stand-up comedian. No. You just got to, every now and then, put a smile on someone's...
Yeah, you have to invigorate the audience somehow.
Correct.
An interest.
So Zara basically said, okay, let's work in chunks. And if you want to think of chunks as chapters. And so we'd find the chunk on limiting beliefs, or around marketing, or we'd find the chunk on podcasting, or video marketing, or self-publishing, which is what my keynote is made up of. And so we'd find a chunk, and then she said, okay, each chunk is made up, you've got to make a point, you've got to tell a story, and you've got to crack a joke. And you can do it in any order. Tell a joke, make a point, tell a story. Tell a story, crack a joke, make a point. And just shuffling it around like that. So, and then there's got to be a really good opening. You've got to have that story at the start where you just, and then so we worked on that. And in the first instance, Zara was actually making me write the script. Now I don't work off a script, but she made me write it down so that I could see it and read it and get used to it. To the point that it became second nature. And what that does as well is that it allows you to muck around with words, because if you ever see, read Steve Martin's book, Born Standing Up, brilliant book for a speaker. I don't think he intended it to be, but he talks about playing with individual words and changing where the words sit and the timing of those words, and you all of a sudden, one word can make all the difference, in a gag.
It's a real art. Yeah, you have to know how to finesse the material as much as you have to know how to create the material itself.
Yes.
And so the keynote is just sort of one piece, right? Like you sort of said, I am Tim Reid, this is what I'm going to talk about, and you had your points, and that's what you always present. Like you've come up with this core content, and that's what the team was helping you sort of refine.
Yeah. The aim of employing Troy and Zara was to work with one keynote and to get that refined and nailed. And now I've given that keynote, I don't know, 150, 200 times.
So it just rolls off the tongue. It's very easy.
Do you know what's really... Yes, it is. But and there was a point... There's a point in that journey where I thought I'd get bored of it. There was a point in that journey when I was getting people in audiences saying, "Oh, I've seen you before," and that would freak me out. My immediate was like, "Oh, you go and get a coffee and a donut because you've seen this," and they go, "No, we loved it." And there was that point where I realised that there's a couple of realisations. One is the Rolling Stones still play Satisfaction, right? Number one.
Yeah,
it's what people want to hear, and it works. So I kind of worked off that. Not that my keynote it's my satisfaction, I guess, And the second thing is what I've realised, Melissa, and you probably realise this too, is that as you get more comfortable with your content, you get more confident with it, and you can start playing with it. And most importantly, you can start playing with the audience more, which is I never did that for the first 100. I was just okay. So I've got through that chunk, and now I'm going to in my mind, and now I've got this chunk, and now I can stop. Now I can look around. Now I can check in on how they're going. Now I can ask has anyone got a question. Now I can walk off the stage and wander through the crowd, which I think to me early days was one of the scariest things that you could do. But this is where all of a sudden, down the track, as you get those 10,000 hours up, and I don't know how many I've got up, but you can start to play with things in a way that will benefit the audience more.
Yeah, and I guess when you get there, you must find a way to sort of take the temperature of the audience and see how people are reacting to your material, and then you can sort of, given the fact that you're so comfortable with it now, you can sort of incorporate new and different things and sort of test things out and see how they're received. I guess it's very similar to what a comedian does, right?
Totally.
You develop your material, you take it out for a spin, and you sort of refine it, like you were saying with the Steve Martin book, and then you sort of basically look at what the rest of the audience is thinking, and you can engage with them and interact with them in different ways to help keep the energy up and get them excited. And that's so interesting.
And one of the things that I do, you talk about the temperature of the audience, is one of the things that I make a real point of is at the start of the conference, or I'm not always at the start of the conference, but before I speak, I like to go and meet the audience. So I will go out, like let's say I'm speaking after lunch, first one after lunch. I'll get there at lunch and I'll wander around, meet people, introduce myself, have conversations. How's your marketing going? What are you doing? What are you finding difficult? What have you done recently that's given you some success in the marketing of your business? And I'll start to do, that'll do two things. I get to eyeball some of the audience. I get to get a sense of where they're at. I ask how the conference has been, and I may even find an anecdote or two where I can say, hey, listen, it's actually interesting, over lunch I was speaking to Emma. Emma, where are you? Oh, okay, Emma, you know how we were talking. Do you mind if I share that story, Emma? And all of a sudden you've got some kind of, I'm part of them.
That's right. And Emma's now a little mini celeb at the conference.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
Hey, team, before we go deeper into the big wide world of public speaking, let's hear about a couple of businesses that want to help build that baby of yours into the empire it deserves to be. This show is made possible by Key Person of Influence, which, according to the Huffington Post, is the world's leading brand accelerator program. Now, they've got some very cool one-day events coming up with some amazing speakers. So I asked head honcho Glenn Carlson to pick his favourite. His answer may well surprise you.
That's horrible, mate. I'm going to have to say, while there's Matthew, who's built, the third fastest growing company in Australia, sold it for tens of millions. Valerie is obviously one of the best content creators in Australia, talking about profile. Tim, his company's built over $1 billion worth of value in his clients. Andrew Griffiths, 12 best-selling books. But, mate, I'm the MC. I'm the one that brings it all together. So, despite all these amazing speakers that have got incredible tenure in their space, I'm gonna say my favourite's got to be me.
Oh, you got to love a big cheese that backs himself. All jokes aside, do your business a favour and grab a $57 seat over at keypersonofinfluence.com/Timbo. Support for this show comes from Net Registry, a one-stop shop for getting your online marketing sorted. Verity Ma, their Chief Marketing Officer, recently told me this story of a very happy mechanic.
So one of my favourite stories of customers that I heard was a salesperson was talking to a mechanic, and he was talking about what sort of email he would like to have and what kind of hosting, whether he wants cloud or cPanel hosting. And the mechanic just said, look, I don't care, build my website, here's my phone number, make my phone ring and send me the bill. And that was the last we heard of him. He didn't provide us content. He didn't provide us any details about his business. We had his contact details. We wrote all the content and we just got his phone ringing and sent him the bill.
Net Registry, where happy mechanics go to grow their business online. Visit netregistry.com.au or give them a buzz on 1300 638 734 and tell them Timbo sent you. And now, back to the interrogation.
I actually have some more questions about what you do to prepare and whatnot. But I want to touch on what you were talking about earlier, and that was sort of, how do you adapt or prepare your keynotes for, let's say, the Victoria Realtor Association versus the Melbourne Plumbers Union? You're going out and you're seeing two completely different groups, and you've got different people, but you have this core content. How do you adapt that?
It's a good, great question. I get a couple of things. I believe, and my keynote's full of case studies. And the commercial outcomes of those case studies. And I strongly believe that the Plumbers Union need to look outside of plumbing for ideas, and the real estate guys need to look outside of real estate. So I don't... in your question was an assumption that you probably need to have a plumbing example and a real estate example in your keynote. I don't think that's the case. I think we need to look beyond it. If I'm aware that there's actually a really good plumbing case study, it's not in my keynote, but I've heard about it before, then I'll go and I'll draw on it. But that also, and from my point of view, it means that my keynote can remain fairly consistent no matter who I'm speaking to. There are other things that, we talk about this keynote, which is my helpful marketing keynote, by the way. There are other things that I talk about. Some people might ask me to talk about customer experience or podcasting or blogging or websites. And, it's interesting for those jobs, I have less of a constructed keynote, and it is still more in a kind of just, it's full of helpful content, but not necessarily with well-crafted stories and timing of jokes and things. But I find they become more workshops than keynotes anyway.
Yeah, and I guess, because you do the podcast and you speak with so many different business owners, and then you have the other side of it where you're interacting with your audience and you're hearing their questions and seeing their responses to the interviews that you've done, you really do have a wealth of information. So I suppose even if you were pulled in to do something that wasn't necessarily part of your keynote, you have so much experience to draw upon, and now you've developed the skills of sort of public speaking, you can meld the two and put something really interesting out there.
And therein lies one of the massive upsides of creating content like you and I do, is that we have so much to draw upon. And there's a great example, and I actually kind of wish this has happened more. It's only ever happened once, but I think it was the best job I ever did. And I was asked to speak as the opening keynote speaker at the Real Estate Institute of Victoria's annual conference, and it was at one of the biggest rooms in Melbourne. And I had 750 hungry real estate agents sitting there, right? Tough crowd in my mind. Who's this guy? Who's this bloke walking up on stage?
Who's this Timbo?
Yeah. So I get there 2 hours early because I like to do AV check, make sure my slides look good, make sure the embedded videos are running, that the sound's good, check my audio, check out all that. And I got there 2 hours early this time because it was a really important job to me. At 9:29, which is when I was speaking at 9:30, the AV guys still couldn't get the projectors working. No audio was working. No audio or video was working. So I had no slide deck. I had nothing. The conference organiser was panicking, and the MC's gone, well, I've got to go up. So he's walked up and he started to introduce me. So I said to the conference organiser, get 3 roving microphones out into the audience and we're going to do a Q&A, right? So I was introduced, I got up, and for the first 10 minutes, I did my opening part of my keynote. Doesn't rely on slides. I didn't tell them what had happened, but it doesn't rely on slides. And then I said, so listen, that's pretty much my view on marketing. I know marketing's a dark art for you guys. You know, it's a bit of a mystery. You try some things, they don't work. You try other things, they work beyond what you thought. That, you know, it's like, I'm here to help you kind of get some more consistency in your marketing. So what questions have you got? So then the questions started coming in from the floor, and what I was able to do was draw on all the previous people that I'd interviewed in my podcast and start to reference, there's that Melissa Maker. She used to clean houses in Toronto. Now she's nailing video marketing, and so I could start to draw on those kind of experiences.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and that's so great. And it's so wonderful too, because, the organizer probably thought you were a total pro for just going up and handling it, right?
I did get a rather large bundle of goodies afterwards.
Oh, well, that's always a bonus. I mean, that and a free lunch. Why not, right?
Yeah.
So it brings me to an interesting question about AV components, because they can be a little bit nerve-wracking, given your most recent anecdote, but they can also be really helpful. And I know I've been to some keynotes where I've seen people who just heavily rely on the slides. Like I remember being at one and there was so much legal ease. Everybody just, people were just falling asleep. It was so boring.
Yeah.
Other times there are just fun and engaging and super helpful AV components. So do you like them? Do you not like them? And what's a healthy balance?
So by AV, we're talking slide deck, we're talking microphones and other things?
Well, you know what? I guess I shouldn't use the word AV. I should more use the word visual components, because you need a mic. I mean, you
gotcha.
have a great voice, but you still need...
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, there are mics and there are mics. I'll talk about the visual components, but I never stand at a lectern. I hate lecterns, so I put that aside. The lapel mic that you can attach to the front of your shirt. That's generally what you're going to get. I don't like them because the minute you turn your head, you're off mic. And they actually don't have that good a quality sound. So, and I keep meaning to buy myself one of these. I just haven't because they're $800 and I'm a tight ass. But it's a sort of like a Madonna. It's a skin-coloured mic that comes along your cheek. Yeah.
Oh, I know it. I know it.
Yeah.
It's groovy.
You can hardly see it. You can turn your head any which way. It'll always pick you up. It's got beautiful quality sound. It's called a Countryman microphone. Funny name. Great microphone. So these are little things that you learn along the way. But to the audio, to the visual aids, I use Keynote. Apple's Keynote. I've spent a considerable amount of money having my slides designed by a pro.
Oh, very
they are mainly, I spent like $2,500, having my slides look beautiful and look consistent. And But
an investment, so well worth it.
You got to spend if you want to be serious about speaking, I'm finding this more and more even as we speak. You've got to drop some money. I'll tell you where that money gets spent. But
Okay.
my keynote, it's mainly pictures. Where there are words, there might be 3 or 4 words. They're fun. They're not funny. They're just engaging slides.
Right.
Again, I'm only working from my experience, but I also know, in answer to your question, that it's interesting if you go between, maybe a whiteboard and some flip charts with butcher's paper and your keynote, and maybe you've even got an object. If you can go between these things, and like not all in one 60-minute keynote, but if you can integrate some of these visual aids, then you are going to be it's going to be a more interesting keynote, But I just rely on the keynote and really spend my time connecting with the audience.
Which I take it is one of the best things you can do to really help secure yourself in the speaker circuit, because once the conference organizers, I think a lot of them ask for feedback, and they'll typically, if they find that Tim was a great speaker, you have a much better shot of getting asked back, and then that feedback would go back to your agency. And I guess I also wanted to know, how do you make contacts? I mean, you are with an agency now, but when you were independent, and let's say someone's kind of starting out, how do you make contacts and sort of get bookings? What do you do? Who are you networking with?
Yeah, that's a good question, because in my experience, I wasn't. I was found. If it was now, and I was going, gee, I wouldn't mind doing speaking. It's actually a really tough question, because I now have like these 6 speaker buddies that we go away twice a year for 2 days and talk about each other's businesses. I know the president of the National Speakers Association. I just kind of like I always have that network's established. But if I was starting again, one of the things that I would do is you got to do the free talks. I hate free. I'll do free every now and then, but starting out, free can be a good thing. And free talks, for me, it would be business chambers or associations, and I'd say, yeah, okay, I'm happy to talk. I'd like to be able to video it, because I either want to review myself and debrief it with my coach, or I actually want to use that vision in my show reel. And I think I touched on it earlier, but I didn't mention show reel, but your show reel's everything.
Yeah, I've been asked for a demo reel before too, just of clips whenever I've done TV or if I've done sort of interviews or radio interviews. And you're absolutely right. People want to know what they're spending money on. They want to make sure they're making a good investment.
Your show reel, you think about it from a conference organizer. These are the people that are going to book you, yeah? They are going to want to see what you look like, how you appear on stage. All they're thinking is they're going to be at the back of the room during this conference. The boss is going to be on a table somewhere. They don't want to get the look from the boss that's basically
the raised eyebrow.
Yeah. At what point was this person a good idea? They don't want that. So this show reel, so the show reel's you in action on stage. It could be you to camera that sort of says, hi, I'm Melissa, sharing your why. There might be the odd testimonial. There'll be logos of other businesses that you've presented for to credentialise yourself. And it's a 90-second reel, I'll put my show reel on as a link in the show notes to this chat with you and I.
Fantastic.
But it's important. And for me, it was actually, they're not easy things to get. The easy way to get a show reel together, A, you've got to get speaking engagements. B, if you really want to expedite the process, you've got to bring a camera crew with you. And they capture the footage. And for the next 5 speaking engagements, you're going to pay a camera crew to capture the footage. Probably a 2-camera shoot, one following you, one on side of stage. Even better, one on the audience to capture. If there is a shot where the audience laughs and you've captured that, that's gold.
So you can't just clip in a shot of just a random audience laughing really hard and slapping their knees.
I'm sure it's been done before, Melissa. I'm sure your idea is not original, but I didn't do that, and over the course of a long time, maybe over a year, finally, because when I got into the habit of, I was being booked to speak, and then I would ask, "Oh, cool, that's great. Are you guys videoing it?" "Yeah, we're videoing. Great. Can I? Well, A, I'd like a copy. That's part of my agreement to speak. B, who is it that is videoing? Can I please have their contact number? And if you really want to push it, you actually roll up with a stick or a hard drive and get them to dump it there and then."
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, or a prepaid post bag that says, "Here you go. All you need to do is put a stick in and send it to me."
Right. Oh, that's great. So in terms of pricing your keynotes, let's talk money. How do you know what you're worth?
Yeah, well, interesting question. I remember someone once said to me about pricing. They said, what you need to do is you need to stand in front of a mirror and you start with a relatively low number and then keep going up in increments of, let's say, 1,000 in this case. And once a smile appears on your face that you can't remove, go back one, and that's your price. Right?
Wow, what a great format.
That's a bit cheeky.
I love that.
You need to do your homework. You need to see what other speakers are charging. You need to go, like, for me it was the fact that, and still is to a point, I'm a no one in a world where there are, like, I lose a lot of work to market. There's a couple of marketing speakers that have TV profiles in Australia. I potentially a more practical speaker than they are, but they can't say, as seen on.
Right.
They can't say that. They say, "Tim, host a number one marketing show." Great. But there's a show here called The Gruen Transfer, and there's a couple of guys on that. It's an advertising and marketing show on TV, which is very popular.
Oh, great.
And, so I have to see, well, what are those guys charging? I need to see what conference organisers, like, what's the threshold of a conference organiser going, yeah, that's manageable, or that's just that's ridiculous. So what are the other factors? I take the Bureau's advice. I try to get a budget. Like, what's your budget? I tell you whether I can work within it.
I always find that such a sticky point, nobody wants to throw out the first number, but you get into this weird dance,
Yeah.
If people were just a little more forthcoming whenever we're trying to negotiate a fee, we always just say, just give us an idea of what your budget is and we'll see what we can do to make it work. But I know it's a great tip to get a feel for the budget.
But for my fees are generally from $5,000 up to, internationally for, if you're going to be days away, up to potentially 12 to 15 grand.
Fantastic.
And that probably doesn't mean a lot to you because your market would be different to my market, but that gives listeners here some kind of ballpark. And again, for a conference organizer of a reasonably large conference, that $5,000 mark is that's kind of where their head's at. There's an expectation. Yeah, he's going to be $5,000. And then as you start to get over, then you've got to figure out, well, A, is that affordable for them? What additional value could I add? Sometimes I go, in addition to that, I'm happy to run a 1-hour Q&A webinar 3 weeks after the conference because I know that the audience will be inspired to take some marketing action and questions will develop. So I'd love to be there to answer them.
That's a great tip too, the value add. Love
value
that.
Value adds that don't require a discount.
Right.
Yeah. So how could you add value that has a high perceived value to them and a low cost to you, Marketing nirvana right there.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. And, I've got my book coming out in the next 2 weeks. Thanks for the testimonial, mate.
My pleasure, and I'm really excited to read it.
Good. You're in there, so you should be. So, you know, the value add there of saying, hey, would you like to buy a quantity at a discounted price? If not, I'll be selling them at the back. You know, I'd like to be able to sell them at the back of the room. Always ask. Because, again, you're being paid to go on someone's stage. So I don't believe it's an opportunity to pitch. But if, you know, what I have found, and this is where I've let myself down as a speaker, is that I haven't had anything to sell on the day. That's good. You know, that means I've left money on the table. But I also know that if you do a good job on stage, then the audience are going to want more of you. They might want a book, they might want a video training series, they might want to join your forum, you know, all these things. So, you know, my books, I take delivery of it in 10 days' time, and I've already sold 200 copies to a couple of conference organisers who I said, hey, listen, you know, would you like to buy a quantity of the books? And it was like, yes.
And then you can even do book signings.
Yep, book signings.
Because I've been at events where the organization has purchased X amount of books. They bring in the speaker, and then the speaker does signings at the back of the room after.
Yep.
And, you know, when we were having our most recent interview, you used the phrase back of room sales with me, and I had never heard it that way before, but I knew exactly what you were talking about. And really a light bulb went off for me, because I thought, yeah, I mean, I've been at conferences before and I've seen the big tables with the people working the back. And I would have to assume that does generate a significant amount of revenue.
I can tell you, and I won't reveal names or numbers, but I have seen extraordinary numbers being done.
I love hearing that. That's so inspiring.
Well, and again, because, you know, this is not about... I always go... Because there's two types of conferences. Those ones where the speakers are speaking for free, the audience have paid nothing to be there, and so they're going to get pitched. I never speak at those conferences. I just speak at private conferences for organisations that are taking their teams or their staff or their franchisees away. And I'm being paid to do that. That said, those people are still necessarily, if you do a good job, going to want more of you. So,
right.
And this is where I've seen it. You know, like I've got a mate who, and this is going to be my strategy with my book. I've got a mate who does a lot of speaking. Highly regarded as one of the better speakers in Australia. He puts a beer jug at the back of the room with a $100 cash float in it, $10, $20 bills, with a pile of books, and says, help yourself out the back. Leave the money in the jar and take a book, right? It's frictionless. It's no hard sell. And there's a beautiful honesty system attached to it. And by the way, I'll be in the foyer if you want me to sign it, you know?
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
A lot of musicians are doing the same thing now with their CDs, or I should not use the word CDs, with their digital downloads. They'll say download the album and donate what you like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
Content. That's a fantastic strategy. And I mean, you're all about finding, you know, the extra revenue streams. And I think that brings up a great point. Like, you don't want to be Mr. Hard Sell up there.
No.
But at the same time, if people really are picking up what you're putting down, you might as well find a way to capitalize on it.
Totally. And that's why, so I'm really excited. Like, you know, I'll tell you in 6 months' time how it's gone. But I'm pretty upbeat about it, because the idea of, you know, just having those books. And the other thing I'm doing is a CD series, and you could do this. You could do the video, you could do the DVD series, where I've taken 6 interviews and created a three disc set, and I've put some intro and outro around it, and I've transcribed each interview and put it into a 3 disc set. And again, that's already pre-existing content.
Yeah, and that's, you know, no real extra work on your behalf. And those are what I like to call just the 24/7 sales. You could be sleeping and you're still making sales, because I assume, you know, you can also sell that stuff online.
Online, yeah, totally. So
that's great.
Cool.
And what about from a skill development standpoint? You know, when I think of you, I think you're very confident, you're very composed, you're a great speaker, you're very concise. Did you have to do anything to develop those skills, from a public speaking standpoint? Or I know you were speaking about, working with the coaches, but was there anything else that you had to do from a preparedness standpoint to get yourself ready to do keynotes?
I think thank you for those kind words, because I watch. I'm always watching myself, because I can kind of rattle on a bit. I listened back, and I still do it, but if I listen back to some earlier podcasts, the lead into some of my questions, I'm literally, and I don't actively listen to my entire episodes, but when I do, and when I have, there's been some lead-ins where I'm yelling at myself, going, would you just get to the point? So I think...
Land the plane.
Yeah, land the plane, mate. Hey, stop talking. I have said to my editor, Daryl, a couple of times, Daz, and I don't edit my podcast, but there's been a couple of times where I've gone, mate, can you just snip the lead into that question, because that is just plain embarrassing. And so the learning there is... We've all got to watch ourselves. We need to be aware of what we're putting out there. We need to be conscious of the fact that, again, it's not about you. It's about them. And so I did have a copywriter, and I've shared this on the show previously. A copywriter once said to me about great copy, keep removing words until it stops making sense. And I kind of, I guess, have taken that into my speaking. Troy and Zara were very good. Comedians are very good at economy of words.
I love that. That's
man,
what a brilliant tip.
Yeah. So I kind of just am always watching myself. Certainly don't always get it right, but at least if you're watching yourself, you can be making improvements.
I do the same thing. I find it very helpful to watch back. Tomorrow I'm doing a segment on a TV show here. And every time I do that show, because I'm a regular expert, I'll always watch my segment after. And I look at my hands. I look at how many times, I have habits of saying exactly or that's right. So I'm always trying to build a level of consciousness into the work that I do so I can continually improve, similar to what you're saying. It's very helpful to watch your stuff.
And by the way, our line's deteriorating a little bit. I think it's manageable right now, but we'll see where that goes. I hate our listeners to not be able to hear us. That would defeat the purpose of what we're doing.
I totally agree.
Have you got? We'll just keep recording. We can let our listeners hear us sort this technical thing out. Have you got like Dropbox or Facebook or email open that could be getting in the way of the internet?
I'll close down my browser. I've closed everything else, although a text message did ding, which was very, very not nice of my text message. Scenario. Okay.
While you're doing that, what I will say is that it's good to watch yourself, and you watch yourself having been on TV tomorrow. But I think even better, go and find some people on TV that are doing similar things to you, experts on other programs, and what do you like about them, or what don't you like about them? And for me, with my podcasting and my speaking, there's been some people who I really admire and kind of draw inspiration from. I'm going to some random night tonight. I'm going by myself. I don't know who's going to be there, but I've heard there's a series of talks on in Melbourne, 5-minute talks, 12 speakers. It sounds a bit TED-ish to me, but I'm going along. I've paid my $50 and I'm just going to go and see what they talk about.
That's so interesting. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Just looking for people who you admire and seeing what they're doing right and how they're really nailing it, and sort of gleaning the tips that you can to develop your own.
Yeah.
I have another question, and I know that you've touched on it a few times in our conversation so far, but maybe you can give us a little bit more insight. preparedness is so important whenever you're going on stage, particularly when you're doing a keynote. So what do you do the day before, the night before, and the hour before you give a presentation?
Don't sleep.
Okay, check.
Yeah. I sleep poorly the night before a job, either because of the job itself or because I'm not a very good traveller, and I'm in an alien bed, like in a hotel in a city. But what do I do? So the day before, every day. I don't have a job for 10 days. As of today, I don't have another job for 10 days. I will practice the opening of my keynote every day, every single day.
Really?
When I'm driving, in my mind, at some point, you just got to. And Zara just drilled this into me. She would actually say you should be practicing your whole keynote every day, and I would agree with that, but I don't.
Wow.
So I do that every day. In the lead up, I know that 3 to 4 days out, I just let it start to, it's just simmering in the back of my mind. I'm subconsciously thinking about it, knowing that there's a job coming up. There's all sorts of bits and bobs I do to, in terms of travel. We could get into the detail of travel, but like I have a toiletry bag that mirrors the toiletries in my bathroom. So it's in my suitcase ready to go. I don't have to, pack a toiletry
Think about
bag.
Packing.
Yeah. I've got a list of all the things that I need to walk out the door with. Wallet are all my credit cards in there. My VGA adapter for my MacBook, my phone charger, my mouse pointer, my lip balm. Just a list that I know I need to take.
Sure.
So I'm not thinking about it, and I can literally walk out the door ready to go. On the day, I do things like there's actually so many things. This sounds ridiculous, but this is the difference between I wouldn't mind doing the odd speaking job and speaking is what I do, right? And they're very different things. And because speaking is what I do, I do things like I text the conference organiser when I land in the city. So they know, at least Tim's in the state,
Yeah. They can sleep better. Maybe not you, but at least they can.
They can. Yeah. I let them know when I'm on site. I'm very clear about I want to do an AV check, at least 2 hours beforehand. So if I'm speaking at the end of the day, when's lunch, when's the afternoon tea break? I want to meet the AV guy, and I actually work hard to establish rapport with the AV guy because they're so important to us. I walk the room. Sometimes, and I think I've mentioned this before, if I haven't, it's embarrassing, but I touch the back of every chair because I do sort of believe in that woo-woo thing of like the space. Like I want to know that I've walked the entire room. And so I've been there. I don't know. I know that sounds weird, and people are now switching off. But I ground myself. I do a little kind of like I stand on the stage, and I actually look around the entire room. What else? Well, I obviously meet people as that. I actually greet people as they're coming into my session. I make a habit of standing at the door and saying hello. Now, I could look like the bouncer. I could look like the I don't know what I look like. Sometimes people go, they see because I've got the microphone on, you must be the next speaker. But all these little things, just like I make.
Do you do any vocal preparedness?
Yeah, I do actually. In my room, I just do in my hotel room, or if it's a local job in my car, maybe just like a bit of Anchorman stuff, like
sound goat sounds.
Yeah, that's a funny. Do you remember that scene in Anchorman where he's sitting at the desk and they're just about to go on and they're coming in the back door. They're coming in the back door. But just to kind of make sure that all those different levels, and I've done no vocal coaching, but I just getting sure that all the different levels of your voice can go, because I do like to play with my voice on stage. So one thing I know, that if we speak like this for the entire time, the audience are going to be absolutely exhausted 10 minutes into the keynote, right? So I'll be sort of going, so this marketing thing can be a bit tough, because sometimes we think we've absolutely nailed it, and then other times we're like, what have I got to do to get this right? And I just that confidence comes, I think, in that's the kind of thing I was talking about earlier, where you can start to give yourself permission to do that.
Right.
The other thing I do on a sort of administrative level is you always do a brief, generally 2 weeks before a job. The client wants to get together on a phone, or they often want to meet. I don't see a need to meet for a 1 hour keynote. That can take a lot of time, and it's not best use of theirs or my time. But I do want to have a phone call with them, and we go through all the different stuff and book AV times and talk about what I'll be sharing and all that. I tell them at that point that I use the word wanker in my keynote. Do you know that word?
Yes, I've heard it before.
Okay. So I use that word, and I get permission that that's okay. I have a photo. I have an image. I talk about self-publishing in my keynote, and I talk about the fact. I make joke of the fact that this self-publishing thing, it's got a little bit out of control. Everyone's publishing a book these days. And I have 4 different book covers, all of which are very funny. And one is how to make wooden sex toys. Like, someone has written that book. Now, I get, again, permission to... just so there's no surprises.
Right.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And the other thing that I do is I ask for 3 names of 3 delegates who are going to be in the audience. One who is absolutely nailing their marketing, one who is completely bamboozled by it, and someone who's neither here nor there. And I ring them and have a chat and find out where they're at. Yeah.
Wow, there's such great strategies. I mean, there's so much in what you said that anybody who wants to get into doing keynotes can sort of take with them and sort of toy with as they build out their strategy, for day of. Because I know whenever I do anything, I have a whole routine of what I do, and it's taken, many years of developing it and figuring out what works for me and what's most helpful, and how do I ground myself and how do I interact. So that's great. I just have one more question.
I love being interviewed by you, by the way.
I am having a great time chatting with you. I think you're loving the opportunity to share some of your own marketing gold.
Yeah, it's a nice turn to the table.
I guess so. If you had to give advice to somebody who wanted to start doing keynotes, what are 3 things you would tell me to do?
I think I've just given them 30 things.
I mean, you have given 30 things, but if I wanted to get started tomorrow, just give me 3 off the top of your head things I could do tomorrow to get started.
On the assumption that you're very clear that this is the right thing to do, and that you are serious about making this a business. It's not a lead. It may well be a lead generation form for the other part of your business, but that shouldn't be your intention. Your intention should be you are going to be a professional speaker and make a living from it. Okay. If that's the case, I think the first thing to do would be to get clear. Go and write that slide deck, and I don't mean get it designed and look beautiful, but literally open up Keynote or PowerPoint and craft your keynote. Literally.
Get the content down.
Get the content down and play with it, and start to, get a confidence around. Yeah, there is something. It's problem solve. It's either going to solve the problem of my audience and or entertain them at the same time. And I don't mean being necessarily funny, but can I deliver that in an engaging way? The second thing I would do is I would start to really look at other people who are doing this. Go, and not necessarily in your industry, but go and look at a whole lot of TED Talks. Go to some talks. Get out of your comfort zone and look at what conferences are happening, and go and see how other speakers are doing it, good and bad. And that'll help you develop your own... It'll help you own your own space. I've got an episode coming out next week, actually, with a lady, Julie Cross, and she talks wholly and solely about owning your own space. And this is something that I pride myself on, is that I try to be me on stage. And that's not easy. It's not easy being me. No, it's not easy being yourself, because what we try to do, and you'd find this when you first hit record all those years ago, you probably tried to elocute every word to within an inch of its life, and you felt awkward. And it's like there was probably a moment, and I'm guessing here, and Melissa's shaking her head because I'm seeing her here, listeners, but there was probably a point where you started to be yourself and everything fell into place. Yeah. So I don't excuse myself for sounding more Australian than the average Australian, and I don't excuse myself for not being as academic as maybe some other marketing speaker. You know, I just got to be me, because if I'm me, then I don't have to remember anything. You know,
right?
So that's two things.
Okay.
The third thing is you've got to spend money. You know, I didn't do this in the early stages. I had a pretty crook-looking PowerPoint keynote that I designed. If you know, here's some places to spend money if you're really serious. You got to get a speaker's website, timreid.com.au. You got to get a show reel. You've got to get a look. You know, go to a stylist. And this does sound wanky, but
no, that's a great point. You have to look the part.
You got to look the part, and looking the part does two things: A, it's part of your personal brand, and B, if part of that is like you've got your speaking outfit, then you don't have to remember what to pack each time. It's like that's the jacket, that's the shirt, that's the pants. You know,
unless you're like me and you bring 3 outfits with you each time, because why not?
Why not? Are you a shoe person or a kind of jacket, or what's your thing?
Oh, are you kidding? I don't know. I stand in my closet with my hands on my hips and I go, what are we doing tomorrow?
So, a website, reel, a stylist, getting your slides, getting a brochure done, like literally a 4-page PDF brochure that you can leave behind, write your book, have a leave behind, all these things. You know, I think you've got to spend... There's some investment in the thousands,
and as it is with any business, right? You've got to have some sort of investment, and you have to have enough faith in yourself that once you've gone out and done a great job, you'll start to make the money back and pay off whatever you've invested.
Correct, and you know, if you've done your numbers and you think you can get to be, you know, you might start off you'll do a few free jobs. You'll very quickly, I think, if you do half a decent job, you'll be starting to get $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 jobs. I mean, you're going to start paying off those sunken costs relatively quickly.
Well, this has been so enlightening, and I'm glad that we ended up doing this, because I feel like I've learned so much more, and I'm going to put a lot more thought into how I can get my keynote strategy up and running for 2016 among all the other things that are going on.
You'd be great at it, Melissa. So, I mean, it is another thing. You've got a lot going on. You've got to be clear as to why you would want to add it. Maybe something has to give in order for you to do it. I don't know, but you need to... you need to be very clear on why you're doing it. And once you do that, then everything will fall into place and you'll absolutely have a ball. You'll be fantastic at it.
Thanks. And thanks for all of your knowledge today.
Pleasure.
It was great.
Done. Well, there you go, team. Everything you wanted to know about public speaking but were too afraid to ask, I would encourage you to add it to your marketing arsenal. You never know what might come from it. It's been amazing for me. I would normally share my top 3 attention grabbers from the interview, but I was the one being interviewed, so that would be a bit weird. But if you have something to share, head over to smallbusinessbigmarketing.com/303 and leave a comment in the show notes. I'd love to know if you are going to add public speaking to your repertoire, or whether it just scares the absolute pants off you. Rosabeth Cantor once said, "It takes as much mental energy to dream small as it does to dream big. So, you might as well dream big." Righto, team. Hey, that was a long episode. one of the longer ones, I'd have to say. Now, there's plenty of marketing gold coming your way in the weeks ahead. Next week, we are joined by this fellow called Sean Callahan, who takes us inside the art of crafting stories that help us sell more stuff. You got to love that. You know how passionately I feel about storytelling, and I think you're going to enjoy you. Well, if you don't enjoy next week's episode, you are going to benefit hugely from it. Hey, big hugs in the spirit of last week's episode with Adam Lippin, the Cuddlist, to both Net Registry and Key Person of Influence for making this show possible. Be sure, team, please, to use Net Registry if you need a website or any part of your online marketing sorted, basically. Head over to netregistry.com.au/Timbo and you will find some exclusive listener packages. Grab a seat at the upcoming Key Person of Influence Business Brand Accelerator over at keypersonofinfluence.com/Timbo. I'll be going to the Melbourne one and would love to see you there. As I said, might have a beer afterwards. Hey? Thanks to my editor extraordinaire, Daryl Delirious Misson, for being the generous, giving human being that he is. Plus, he makes me sound half decent. Hey, and also thanks to Lockie Doley for doing what he does very well and for doing something that I wish I could do, and that's sing and play instruments and just generally be an all-round rock star. I'd kind of like that. You know, like Michael Hutchins from INXS. Yeah. Anyway, I digress. Hey, check Lockie out, lockiedoley.com. If you need a speaker for an upcoming event, timreid, reid.com.au. And if you really want to surround yourself with motivated business owners, then I would suggest joining the Small Business Big Marketing Forum over at crankmymarketing.com. $69 a month, 30-day, no questions asked, money-back guarantee. Can't see a lot of downside there, team. Until next week, I am Timbo Reid. Thanks for listening to the Small Business Big Marketing Show. May your marketing be the best marketing. Bye for now.